these were those who had a repeat cobalamin levels done after 1-2 months, and then also they were if they were if the second time also they were persistently reduced, then we went on to checking their intrinsic factor antibody and giving them trial of cobalamin. And even then, these those who were negative, they uh, were negative for intrinsic factor antibody. Their repeat serum cobalamin, if it was found to be normal, no further investigation was warranted, and they were just dealt with as for food malabsorption cobalamin deficiency. Those whose repeat serum cobalamin was still in the subclinical range, they were then further investigated for whether they had any sort of overlying issues with by checking their methylmalonic acid and homocysteine. If that was elevated, then this could actually even suggest some form of perhaps renal disease, and then are all the others parameters that relate to the technical part of this of the assay of cobalamin, that why it was coming persistently low. We could even deal with myeloma and paraproteins. So then we also have went into much detail about the patients with diabetes mellitus, how they were form a special group because diabetes has a very special association with pernicious anemia. So even in that context, in the type 1 diabetics and even in the type 2 diabetics who are on metformin, for all of them, the guidelines suggested that for those subclinical deficiency patients, an empirical trial of the low dose oral cyanocobalamin should be given, and then and strict instructions to follow up if the neuropathy develops or if it worsens, and then the cobalamin levels could be checked for improvement. And subsequently, if the patients were if no definitive and also they had not mentioned anything about that if those patients on metformin, that there's no actually definitive therapy, that prophylactic treatment should be given for patients on metformin therapy. But if the serum cobalamin levels are reduced in those patients who develop this neuropathy, then their intrinsic factor antibody should be tested, and then concurrently they should, if it is positive, it should treat it lifelong. If it is negative, then for they should be treated as antibody negative pernicious anemia. And then we had these patients on HRT, where actually HRT intake did not was no association between cobalamin deficiency and HRT has been documented. They are just advised dietary restrictions. Then in pregnancy, there's 30% decrease in the third trimester. So for that, they are advised sort of like a short course of hydroxycobalamin injection postpartum, and even during pregnancy. Also, they are given 3 injections of hydroxycobalamin to cover for the deficiency in pregnancy, and then followed up 2 monthly with cobalamin levels being checked. Then there was all this about patients, infants, mostly those with gastrointestinal surgery. Of course, they needed the full course of that depends basically upon the type of surgery. If it was just an esophageal bariatric surgery, then depending on the route of and the type of surgery, their supplementation was given. And for those who had those gastric and ileal resections, for them, of course, lifelong therapy was needed. Then also for infants, we had to take into account that neuropathy should not develop in those with those rare intrinsic factor and intrinsic factor receptor and uh, defects. So in those patients also, in the presence of clinical suspicion, they were their methylmalonic and homocysteine levels were checked, and then the role of holocysteine, however, is undefined. Holotranscobalamin had a role in pregnancy, but holotranscobalamin does not have any sort of a role in infants for their checking, and no specific current recommendations are there for whether during breastfeeding associated biochemically low cobalamin status in asymptomatic infants need to be checked and treated. So with this, we just go on to the folate deficiency part. And for this, folate is the term encompassing all the different biologically active forms of the vitamin, and folic acid is the synthetic form used in supplements. Folate, basically we use folate for all the biologically active forms of the vitamin, and folic acid is then used for the synthetic form. That is, those preparations that are used in supplements and fortification of food, those are folic acid, whereas the biologically active forms within the body are basically the folates, the hydroxy, the tetrahydrofolates and the dihydrofolates. Those are those folates which are the biologically active forms. Both types are absorbed, however, from the proximal small intestine, and almost half of the body folate is found in the liver. And the bioavailability of dietary folate is influenced by many factors. Um, Basically, folate would be mostly, it is, since it is mostly found in the liver, and the bioavailability would depend upon the factors which affect in absorption from the intestinal lumen. And natural folates in food are also vulnerable to a variable degree of degradation by cooking and processes. Now, basically, folates are found mostly in, we can remember folates from foliage, so they are found mostly in green leafy vegetables, and those vegetables, mostly spinach and also coriander and all those green leafy vegetables, they are high in folic acid content. And but during the process of cooking, basically much of the degradation of this folate occurs. And then this can, like preparation of food and then other factors relating to absorption within the lumen, they could affect the overall absorption of folic acid. And there is general consensus the bioavailability of food folates is on average about 50% lower than folic acid. So folic acid tablets, they have a sort of a higher bioavailability than the folate in food, because most of it is either degraded by the cooking processes, and also natural folates are vulnerable to the type of storage of these products and heating and cooking. So basically, natural folate supplementation by natural folates, if we suspect a folate deficiency, we would not go about asking them just to increase their folate intake, because that would have very low bioavailability for folate. Now, a low intake of poor absorption of folate leads to a low serum folate level, so which then leads to low tissue levels. So, of course, and as folate is the degree is required for the DNA synthesis, the earliest signs of deficiency are seen in rapidly proliferating cells such as those of the bone marrow and gastrointestinal tract. And severe, however, folate deficiency can cause pancytopenia and megaloblastic anemia. This is one of the other differences of folate and cobalamin deficiency, that folate deficiency, basically, body stores are just found only in the liver. And so once the folate is deficient in the diet, there is very early signs of folate deficiency start to develop, and mostly in the bone marrow and gastrointestinal tract. And then in the bone marrow, they can cause this pancytopenia and megaloblastic anemia. For cobalamin, we had like since there are a great body stores of cobalamin, so since it's a fat soluble vitamin, so the stores are maintained for quite some time. So even it's only in the infants whose mothers are also for cobalamin deficient, they present earlier, whereas infants who have a store of maternal who have maternal um, uh, passive transfer of cobalamin during fetal life, so their stores can take them through the first 1 to 3 years of their life even. So then even those with the intrinsic factor or intrinsic factor receptor defects or deficiencies, they present sort of later on in their childhood, during 1 to 5 years. But for serum folate levels, they are the first ones to be to present earlier. So they present earlier. And also with chemotherapeutic agents, when the cells are rapidly or when in malignancies, when they're rapidly dividing cells, folate deficiency settles in very early, before cobalamin. So, given that serum folate reflects the recent dietary intake, also regarding the measurements, the lab values, so serum folates would then, the value of serum folates would vary according to the dietary intake. And concerns have been raised about any assay performed after an oral folate in testing. So that is why fasting, basically post folate is recommended. It could because oral folate could mask the underlying deficiency and cause false negative results. So in addition, false positive reduced serum folate may be found because a recent folate may actually cause may not show the deficiency, so there will be false negative result. However, a pregnancy, sort of a false positive result could show reduced serum folate levels in patients with anorexia and chronic alcohol consumption, and even in normal pregnancy and patients on anticonvulsant therapy. So these patients, they may not be folate deficient as that, but it's just the type of food, or the type, basically the lack of food that they are in taking, or the type of alcohol consumption which had decreased the folate stores during the time of the test. Or even patients on in normal pregnancy who have a physiological fall in folate levels, and patients on anticonvulsant therapy where folate metabolism is affected. So it is important to consider the results of the serum folate levels within the context of the full clinical picture. This goes same with the one that we discussed about cobalamin. That cobalamin levels should also interpreted in based on the context of the full clinical picture. Now, there is no clearly defined progression from the onset of inadequate tissue folate status to development of megaloblastic anemia. Both biochemical and clinical evidence of folate deficiency can be observed in the absence of clinical symptoms. So even if they, just like cobalamin, even if clinical symptoms are not there, sometimes biochemical and clinical evidence of folate deficiency can be there. Uh, with the increasing adoption of food fortification, the incidence of folate deficiency has declined significantly. But an interpretation of folate status in patients has to be made in relation to the risk of known factors causing deficiency. So basically, food folate deficiency, or although fortification with food has a low bioavailability, but even then the folic acid that is used for pharmacological folic acid, that is readily available over the counter, and most of the food also is now fortified with the folate. So in that because of that, food deficiencies are not a very huge part of it, although I think we will go again over the causes of folate deficiency. There was a chart in the beginning of the causes of folate and B12 deficiency side by side. So regarding the chart, since most of the causes of cobalamin deficiency were in all in I think we could skip on to that chart as well. So in all ages, we have malabsorption, basically poor bioavailability because of ileal diseases to be present in cases of folate deficiency. So so in cases of folate deficiency, there is poor bioavailability due to malabsorption, and also because it is absorbed in the jejunum. So inflammation of small intestine due to celiac disease, tropical screw, and Crohn's disease can cause folate disease. And low intake of folate rich foods. So all these are the general causes that can affect the infants, people at any stage. For infants, though, the main deficiency is the mutation in the proton coupled folate transporter. So it's this is the main deficiency in infants. um, the like the inherited deficiency would that be of the transporter. So, because folate absorption just requires this proton coupled folate transporter. So, this transporter, if it is deficient, then because most of the metabolism even of folate starts from its absorption from the intestinal tract. So, just this transporter defect is the one. We don't have so many defects like the intrinsic factor. Then we have intrinsic factor receptor. Then we have transcobalamin deficiency. So, there were a lot of genetic factors involved in infants. In infants, the only deficiency mutation with folate is that of the receptor, which transporter, which actually transports it within the cell from the food. It can be either deficient in food, or it can be either poorly bioavailable in food, or it can be poorly absorbed from the intestine, or it can there can be a receptor deficiency. Then maternally deficient the deficiency secondary to high fetal and infant requirements can occur. And in older people, there could be poor bioavailability because of, again, because of poor intake and diet and all that. So we had gone over these earlier as well. The the clinical symptoms that anemia would be there as well. Dietary intake would be there as well and positive. And this main features regarding folate are basically that folate. Then in case of cobalamin deficiency, we had the glossitis and the beefy tongue, whereas folate deficiency mostly present with the stomatitis, so with mouth ulcers, which reflect the folate deficiency. Paresthesias and neuropathy were more common with the cobalamin, but this shows only features of they've not mentioned many features particular to folate deficiency. It's just the anemia, and the main clinical feature would be that of mouth stomatitis, and another features related to the type of disease. For example, celiac disease could have those features of malabsorption and steatoria, and so all those features could cause folate deficiency. Now, in patients who have this folate deficiency, what we need to go is we have discussed the basically the pitfalls in the diagnosis of serum folate levels, because they would be they would vary with the dietary intake. If there is a decent intake, then there would be false then the folate levels would be like falsely they would be in the normal range, so it will give a false negative result for the deficiency. And then they could be falsely positive, that is in patients with they could show false positive deficiency if patients had recently consumed alcohol, or are anorexic and have or a normal pregnancy with reduced folate and on anticonvulsant therapy. Then the test basically to diagnose folate deficiency are those serum folate levels, and many clinical laboratories they today measure the serum folate by the assay that is used is the basically chemiluminescence or fluorescent detection system, but they measure it by the competitive folate binding protein. So there's a folate binding protein assay which uses the chemiluminescence assay. So despite considerable variations in performance, now cobalamin was ELISA assay, and therefore it was um, amenable to all those defects that we have can we have because of interference with proteins and other like if there are other high intrinsic factor antibodies also led to normal levels of the cobalamin. So this is also in a chemiluminescence or fluorescence detection system using competitive folate binding proteins, and liquid chromatography, tandem mass spectrometry, international techniques are being used despite considerable variations in performance between assays. There was close correlation of the consensus mean in the UK NICAS survey. This offers the prospect of harmonization of reference range for serum folate levels. So there is no clear consensus on the level of serum folate that indicates deficiency. Conventionally, clinicians have used serum folate less than 7 nanomole per liter as a guideline because the risk of so a nanomole, 7 nanomole per liter or 3 microgram per liter. This is a guideline because the risk of megaloblastic anemia greatly increases below this level. So, however, just like cobalamin, we have that indeterminate zone again between 7 to 10. So, values of less than 7 are like significant to label them as folate deficient, whereas 7 to 10 is the indeterminate zone. Therefore, a low serum folate level should be taken as suggestive of deficiency rather than as a highly sensitive diagnostic set. So, alone folate is never a diagnostic for folate deficiency because, of course, because of the relationship with the food and intake, and because it reflects the recent folate status. So, even in pregnancy, because recent folate would be low because of increased consumption by the or utilization by the fetal growth. So since it is amenable to all those defects, and because of its relationship as an acute phase reactant, even so no, sorry, no, not folate, it's just a recent folate status, so then be there. So then and also all those uh, um, all those interfering substances that could prevent the binding of folate with its competitive folate binding protein in the chemiluminescence assay. Those are the basically the pre-analytical and the analytical part of detection of folate that is important. So for that we have this again, this range from between 7 to 7 to 1 to 10, like these two groups are identified as folate deficient. Then we have the red cell folate. The red cell folate gives an assessment of the tissue folate status. So over the lifetime of the red cell. So this is how this red cell folate is different from the serum folate levels. That is, it refers to the status, tissue folate status over the lifetime of the red cells, and is therefore regarded as an indicator of longer term folate status than the serum folate is would show only the assay at that point of time when it is taken, whereas red cell folate would be something like an HbA1c, where it would show the status of the folate in the tissues during the life of the red cells. So a red cell folate level then below 340 nanomole per liter has been regarded as consistent with clinical folate deficiency. So we have values of less than 7 nanomole per liter in case of serum folate, and for red cell folate, in the red cell, the folate would be sequestered at a higher concentration, when then levels below 340 nanomole per liter are regarded as consistent with the clinical folate deficiency in the absence of cobalamin deficiency. So, whether serum folate or red cell folate is better for assessing body folate status has been extensively argued, and a pathology benchmarking review concluded that serum folate measurement provides equivalent information to red cell measurement. However, it is so serum folate, it is equivalent to red cell measurement. However, it is suggested about 5% of patients with the in 5% the measurement of red cell folate may be useful with macrocytosis who have a normal serum fat. So it's only a 5% patients. So mostly in patients who have that serum folate low, they will have red cell folate also low. But it's only just this 5% of patients who may have a normal folate reduced, and the red cell folate who have a normal serum folate, and they have the red cell folate reduced, reflecting the tissue deprivation of folate. So current red cell folate assays are affected by pre-analytical and analytical variables which preclude them from being a robust assays. So they do have those pre-analytical and analytical variables. Um, Although they measure this folate over the long term life of the RBCs, but the method used, they not actually, there is a lack of standardization of the method even used, and there are inter method agreement, there's poor inter method agreement. So recent reviews also suggest serum folate measurement may be better than red cell folate because it is affected by fewer. Okay, so basically pre-analytical and analytical variables affect both the red cell and the serum folate levels. In fact, some studies have suggested that serum folate may be better in showing the may is not the thing about serum folate is that it is less affected by the pre-analytical and analytical variables compared to red cell folate. But red cell folate is more like a more stable value, which shows the long-term tissue status of folate deficiency. So there are pros and cons for both. Red cell shows the long-term tissue status of folate, and therefore a more reliable quantity quantification of folate status, whereas serum folate is more fluctuant in because of dietary variations, and but however it has less pre-analytical and analytical variables compared to red cell folate. And then homocysteine, we had gone to earlier. There was all this talk about homocysteine being the levels. There's a lot of pre-analytical variables for homocysteine as well, because it is a sensitive indicator of red cell folate and strongly indicated and correlated with red serum folate levels, and levels below 10 nanomole per liter are that is okay. So this was like we had gone into the quantity for there was for um, homocysteine. They had mentioned homocysteine and cobalamin deficiency as well, and there the values that they had mentioned were 5 to 16 micromole per liter. So was the normal homocysteine. So they mentioned that serum folate levels in the low, if there are serum folate levels less than 10 nanomole per liter, this is a serum folate level which is in nanomoles per liter, less than 10, and the total homocysteine arises as a byproduct of methionine metabolism and is normally present in plasma at concentrations below 12 micromole per liter. So 5 to 15 was micromole per liter was like the normal range. And depending on age, gender, and renal function, and of course genetic factors and all those factors, nutritional status of several other vitamins, because we had mentioned that not only B12 folate and affect the homocysteine level, but B6 also, and also the nutritional status and the genetic factors and renal function, and based on age, gender, also in fact, even we've gone through earlier about alcoholism and smoking, and of course age changes with uh, and in pregnancy. So all these factors they could all these factors they affect the homocysteine level. So it is therefore a specific marker. It is not a specific marker for folate status, and it is a stringent requirement. It has stringent requirements regarding sampling and technical issues. This had also been discussed earlier, that the serum, there's a sample for total homocysteine. It needs to be when it is drawn, it needs to be placed on ice, and the plasma needs to be separated within about 2 hours of collection, because of contamination with red cell lysis causing spuriously elevated full homocysteine levels. So there is a lot of this technical issues regarding the sampling and the analysis of it, and also the physiological variations with age and gender and alcoholism, uh, and all those renal failure in renal failure patients also, the values uh, vary, and also with hypothyroidism, and not only in pregnancy but with oral contraceptive pills and hormone replacement therapy, all these factors. And also not only just the B12 and folate, but also the B6 vitamin, they also affect the level of folate, so level of homocysteine. So therefore there are a lot of technical issues regarding homocysteine measurement. So a serum folate level less than 7 is indicative, whereas a routine red cell Mm. So less than 7 is like indicative of folate deficiency, and the routine red cell folate testing is not necessary, because most of the cases the serum folate levels would correlate with the red cell folate. Only 5% of patients we know where the serum folate may be normal, but red cell folate is reduced, showing a reduced tissue supply of folate. And in the presence of strong clinical suspicion of folate deficiency despite normal levels, then the red cell folate needs to be undertaken after a cobalamin deficiency has been ruled out. Then plasma total homocysteine, this can be measured to confirm suspected folate deficiency only in special circumstances. So a level above 15 micromole would be indicative of folate deficiency, but must be assessed in relation to local reference ranges. So there's a lot of variation with total homocysteine level with folate deficiency. Now the clinical approach to investigation. I think we'll just go through this, and perhaps rejoin when we talk about the treatment part as well, because there's this 6 minute notification coming about the time limit for the meeting. We'll probably take a break in between and rejoin again. So for all those who are joining in for the first time, we please do rejoin. I will using the same link. So, regarding the clinical approach to investigation and treatment of folate associated disorders, there's usually a decrease in serum folate within several weeks of folate deprivation. But so within weeks, where there is a folate deprivation, there will be a decrease in serum folate. But it is now not clear how long the serum folate must be in order to cause knock on biological and hematological effects. So conditions which mimic cobalamin deficiency and could cause the folate deficiency, because isolated clinical folate deficiency cases are extremely rare. They mostly occur in conjunction with cobalamin deficiency because their metabolic cycles are interlinked. So in developed worlds, and a diagnosis of folate deficiency should be made with the consideration of circumstances leading to shortage or malabsorption, because most of the cases of malabsorption are similar. So affecting the small intestine, in jejunum with the celiac and iliac diseases. And also when there is malabsorption of multiple nutrients, folate and cobalamin together are affected. Furthermore, the metabolic roles are also closely linked. So whenever we suspect a case of folate deficiency, basically the folate and cobalamin levels are mostly done simultaneously, so as to rule in or rule the other in or out. And in addition to low serum folate, a low serum folate may be associated with low serum cobalamin levels. Whenever serum folate is low, it is usually associated with a low serum cobalamin level also, in which case treatment is initiated with the cobalamin therapy before adding in folate therapy. So this is one of the basically keys for treatment. Also, they would probably go into this in the treatment part as well. That whenever serum folate is low and also serum cobalamin level are also low, when there is combined deficiency, it is best to initiate treatment with cobalamin therapy before adding in folate. Because if we start giving the folate, then uh, clinically the lab values will improve, but the patient could go into severe cobalamin deficiency with neurological symptoms. So it could mask those neurological symptoms of cobalamin deficiency, and that would be more um, dangerous for the patient. That is, symptoms have been masked, because cobalamin therapy clinically is more severe with neuropathy when develop and neurological deficit uh, setting in. So also serum folate seems to be the preferred marker for folate status in cobalamin deficiency also, because the red cell folate may be lower in the presence of cobalamin deficiency. So if they both occur side by side, then red cell folate is usually more is maybe lower in the presence of cobalamin deficiency. And if there's a low serum folate, there would be a low cobalamin levels also. And in patients with low cobalamin levels, the serum folate may be lower than the level of than the folate status. Sometimes the folate levels may be even in the low normal range. So anemia due to folate deficiency is now most often seen in cases of poor diet. Basically, the causes are we have gone through them, that they are basically dietary associated with those who are habitually because they have low consumption of these green leafy vegetable and legumes. And goat's milk is a much lower folate concentration than cow's milk. Cow's milk is most deficient in iron, and goat's milk is deficient in folate. So, an infant fed exclusively on goat's milk may then become deficient with folate, unless commercial folate fortified goat milk is used. Then in alcoholism, the risk of we have dietary deficiencies, and also in pregnancy also there is, because of multiparity and hyperemesis gravidarum, there is uh, and also because of the growing fetus. So all those nutritional requirements of the mother also days, and the fetus are they together cause a folate deficiency. Then even if patients consuming more than 80 gram of ethanol daily, and with and because of liver disease, because liver is the main the site of folate storage. So they would also be at risk of folate deficiency. So in mothers, there's increased requirement not only with the pregnancy, but there could also be increased requirement in cases of hemolytic anemias and sickles or hemoglobinopathies like sickle cell disease, where there is a rapid increased red cell requirement and abnormal hemopoiesis going on. So wherever there is a peripheral or destruction of red cells and abnormal hemopoiesis, so even then the red cell require increased red cell because of increased retic count, or increased erythropoiesis, or even whether it may be ineffective erythropoiesis, but just because the erythropoiesis is stimulated, so there would be increased requirement of folate in those cases as well. And those with exfoliative disease, skin disease, they also have increased folate requirements, because and those with intestinal diseases, because would also then of course be at risk for increased folate requirements. And hemodialysis patients also have post dialysis red cell folate may be the preferable assay, because serum folate levels are reduced in the immediate post dialysis period. So basically red cell folate therefore would be a more sensitive marker for patients on dialysis, but serum folate would be a more sensitive marker for patients who have cobalamin deficiency associated with folate. So because the red cell folate would be lower in those patients. And low folate status is seen following chronic use of medications also. And the medications that are some medications, and they have not actually mentioned, particularly the anticonvulsants. And also in patients who have the polymorphism in the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase gene, the C67 670 variant, they lead to more labile enzyme forms that is associated with lower folate status. And this has been linked to a higher risk of several chronic diseases and conditions with neural tube defects also in children. So, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase is also